Hello and welcome back to Stu's Structures. We're here today with video 21 in the series of building the beanery, so stay tuned. Okay, so in this segment of building the beanery, we're going to work on the overhead walkway that goes in between the two buildings. Figure out where the roof was going to go on the one-story building that's underneath of that. I need to get these two things in place so we can mount all those buildings together. It's just too hard to get in between them and work down in there. Yeah, I got these big mitts for paws or whatever. And it's just easier to do some of this ahead of time, prep work, before we put the buildings together as one big unit back there. And I think I'm going to leave the two buildings, the hotels, separate from the main beanery structure as two separate units for the time being. I think when I get to the point that I'm actually going to place them on the layout, then I'll mount those two buildings together at that point in time. But in any case, we still got a lot to do to get to that point. We have the stairways to work on also. So we're going to continue on with all this and get some of those other little things out of the way in this video and see how far we can get. So let's get started. Now, in the last video, I did show some of these shots of the overhead walkway that I've been talking about. And you know, this shot doesn't really show the overhead brace or the understory supports very well. This one just barely shows them. And the first shot, though, you could see that the walkway was just above the second floor. Now this does show the braces that hold up the walkway underneath a little bit better. There's some X bracing at two levels and then just high beams on either side. But in between the buildings, what I'm going to do is set up these angles that connect to the building on both sides, A and B here. And the bottom angle is slightly bigger than the top angle. Then the wood walkway will sit down in the the top angle. And in the lower angle, between that and the top angle that creates kind of a U-channel, these cross I-beams will go between the two buildings. And then in between that, down at the bottom, there's also some X bracing that you see down there that I'm going to add in the letter D down there pointing to the two. Now, you don't really see a lot of this, but I need to get some structural support between the two buildings. I think I'm also going to add in, you know, once I get the roof added into the first floor building, that'll attach the two buildings together fairly well. But I think I'm also going to add in some flooring material between the two buildings because I want them to be, you know, pretty structurally sound, the two of them mounted together. And you know, a lot of this won't be seen. If you get down really low, you could see some of this X bracing and stuff from the you know, outside, but a lot of this won't be visible. But structurally, just to attach the two buildings together, I think, you know, the more I beef this up, the better off I'll be. Now I just use, you know, cheap plastics, and on eBay there's sellers that you can get this ABS white plastic from in bundles, and for $9 or $10, just under $9, you know, under $10, you can get a bunch of this stuff. So, you know, I'm using these angles out of this. It's a real soft ABS plastic, but it'll work for what we want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-paint the pieces that will attach to the brick just to make that whole process easier down the road, and then everything else all glue together. So I just go out and use the rattle can and you know, put all this paint on these and get this out of the way, and we're ready to start attaching these to the building. So the next thing I want to do is figure out the height of where this walkway is going. I know I want to make it just a little higher than it actually was on the building to give me good clearance for the trains that I need to run underneath the walkway outside. These original uprights for that walkway that I took apart really are just not quite tall enough. So I'm going to have to come up with something else for those. But I come back and add these angles on then. And I add on the bracing that goes under the roof on the one-story buildings to both the hotel buildings. This one and Hotel 2 building coming up here as well. And these angles set back a little from the edge because I'm going to add H-beams to the outside to continue this walkway on out. And I want them to come in and meet with these angles back here and trim them so that I get a good, look. I don't want it to look like it ends at the edge of the building. And then I come back and I set the two buildings on this big piece of plastic sign and mark where they go, and then cut this plastic out and then test fit everything, setting all the buildings down into and on this with the pieces of one-story walls in between them, making sure that everything is going to be tight and will glue without any problems. I did have to come back and just notch a couple of things. And then I went ahead and cut the one-story roofs. I knew how wide they were, and after I had these angle braces on there for the roofs in the buildings, I could figure out the length on those. So, then I just come back and glue everything. So this is just a completed shot of, the two one-story buildings and the two hotels all connected together finally as one big unit. And the one-story roof on that building. I need to put the roof material on it. But a couple of tools that we haven't talked about in the past. I use these syringes down in between those buildings. Gluing that roof on was really a chore, so these syringes made it nice and easy just to suck up some glue in these, and I can reach down and get to the edges. And as I'm gluing all these buildings and all this together, I don't want, I want all the buildings to set level and nice and flat on the floor. So I weight these down pretty heavily on the top with these different weights that I have. You can use cut steel or anything for weights, but that way it makes sure that nothing moves and everything is nice and level on the bottom. So when I get to add it to the building later on, that I don't have any complications. Next thing I'm going to do is just come back and put this tissue paper on the roof. I want this roof to look like tar paper, so I pre-paint the flashing for both sides where it meets the brick to make that easier, and then I come back and just use regular tester's glue and spread it on the surface, and then use a brush to kind of burnish this down. Now the crinkly effect, it makes it look more like tar paper, and when I brushed it down, it kind of took some of that out of it but left some of that crinkliness in there. And then I put the flashing up the sides, just 4 6-foot pieces, and then painted everything black. So once that's all painted, and it's still got a little bit to dry here, but I come back with a indelible marker and just mark seams in it so it looks like there's been sealing done between sheets of tar paper on the roof. And then I come back and cut this I-beam in for cross members, and I take just the top edge of it off so it'll set back in the angles on both sides the way I want it to, and I just use a rattle can to paint all those black and get them ready to install, let them set up while I'm making this jig. And what I did at one end was I cut it so I could slide down in between the beams to get the separation, and the other end is square, so I can slide it into track and make sure they're perfectly square going back through both sides of the buildings. And once I get all those laid out, I come back with my little glue stick that I made and just go down in there and touch a little glue to the ends of the top and bottom of each of these beams. And we have one more part of the puzzle out of the way and built. And I got to touch up the paint here and there, but basically that's the structure for the walkway going through the building, minus the wood planking on top. So then we have to come back and cut the wood, and this is just time consuming, so I'm going to hand this over to my elves and let them do this.
Come on, really, Stu? You get us out here to do this? This is easy. I just get my magic X-Acto and 1, 2, 3. They're all done. Come on, get a grip. You can do this. This is easy. Get with the program.
Okay, so maybe that was taking it a little too far. I do use them when I shouldn't have half the time. But anyway, that's another chore off the list of things to do. Now, I drew this diagram of the support structures for the walkway as it leaves the building and goes out towards the railroad tracks. There's 2 of these on one side of the structure and 1 on the other side of the structure. And what I'm going to do is the I-beams that we were going to use for supports were a little short that I cut off those stairways before. So I'm going to use those for this letter C here. And what I'm going to do is trim one side of the angle off the top of the I-beam, and I'm on one side, on both sides of the I-beam, so that it'll sit flat like the U-channel back in the building. And then the rest of it will stick out to meet up with this support out at the far end. And then I have a plastruct I-beam that I'm going to use for the uprights, and then we'll do the cross members and the X bracing out of other material that I'll show you a little bit later. Now these uprights that I was originally going to use for the uprights to support the walkway were just a little bit short. So what I'm going to do is come back and use these. I'm going to cut the bottom bases off of them and later use those for bridge supports, and use the others for the extensions on the beams that come out from the building to the side supports. Now with the other I-beams that I had, I didn't have quite enough material, so I came back here and manufactured a couple of I-beams just out of those signs that I have shown previously, and just cut strips and glued them together to form I-beams. And then I came back here and started measuring all these pieces out. I set up a paper template and then cut these pieces out on the template and laid them on the template to start gluing all this together. And I just used a small I-beam in between for the X bracing. You can see the white beams that I manufactured, and I came back and once I had those all glued in place, put these plates on the outside of them, which are just cut out of those real thin signs. Then once I used a rattle can to paint them, you know, it's a good looking support for either side. I may make the second one for the other side later on, but for now I'm going to go with these two. And I did start working on the side staircase as well. I went ahead and glued these two stair pieces together, and I took some of the short supports and an I-beam and made a center support for the stairs coming down. And I also started gluing the stairs on the back of the building. I need to get this staircase in place so I can build the structure around it. So I went ahead and glued all these evergreen styrene stairs together. We need a couple more views blocks for in the two hotel buildings, so I just went ahead and cut black construction paper and made two view blocks. And you know, I'm just going to stick them down in the building. I'm not worried about having perfect view blocks. Eventually I may add some interiors to some of these rooms, so you know, I'm just going to stick them in there for the time being just to keep light from going through. And I also started processing all of the wood cross members for all of this walkway. You know, I'd previously shown where I made all these, but you know, to process them, what I'm doing is just taking this India ink here and mixing it with a bunch of isopropyl alcohol in this bowl, and then I just dump all those wooden pieces in there and let them soak for a while, and then take them out and let them dry. Now I want a lot of variation in these sticks, so once these dry for a while, I stick them back in there and do a second coat or a third coat or even a fourth coat. So there's varying grades in the different shades of grays on this. So there's another segment of Stu Structures. The beanery is getting there. I keep saying that over and over and over. It was nice to get these two last hotel buildings attached as one unit. I had mentioned earlier before that I think I'm just going to leave that detached from the other part of the building that we built until I do mount it on the layout later on. It just makes it easier to set aside and store. It's just such a big bulky building that it would take a lot bigger of a box if I mounted it all together to store it in temporarily till I can get a layout to put it on. All these structures, you know, our layout club, I don't know if you've watched the Grafton, West Virginia Model Railroad Club video that I posted at one time, but I explained in that video that we lost our home later on, and we're kind of looking for a new home, but it's just been a very hard thing to do. There's not a lot of good buildings in downtown Grafton that allow us the ability to do the things with the restrictions that we need to do what we want to do. So in any case, this is something that I always wanted to do, and maybe in a few years I can just build a building of my own and have my own layout if nothing pans out there. But in any case, I've always wanted to build these buildings, so I'm continuing on, and the beanery is just one of the few structures, well, several structures that we have to build for this layout. So, you know, I like where it's going. We've still got at least a couple more videos probably in this series to get this building finished. 2 at least. I'm looking at maybe 3. I think I'm going to go ahead and do one video because there's a lot of small things around the building that just add to the building and are part of this building. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just make a temporary platform for this that the building can mount to eventually, and you know, put some of those extra things on there as well. I don't know, we'll see when I get to that point how far that'll go, but in any case, I want to thank you for coming back and sharing my videos with me. I enjoy doing this, and I know there's a bunch of you guys that follow me out there. Like and share these videos. Give a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button down below the video, and you'll be notified. If you hit the bell also, you'll be notified when a new video comes out. But even if you're just subscribed, it gives you the ability to find me quicker and easier and follow along with the videos as I post them each week. So in any case, it's still winter time here. I do these videos a few in advance. By the time this one comes out, hopefully it'll start to be warming up, and you know, spring may be in view by the time this one comes out. But in any case, or today it's just a miserable rainy day, so it's nice to be inside working on this and getting some of these videos together. So in any case, I hope you're enjoying spending some time with your trains this weekend. Like I said before, this winter, get out there and build some structures, you know, play around, even if it's just an outhouse, just to build your skills and you know, start learning and being able to do this kind of thing. It's not really that hard. It's more time consuming than anything, and a lot of it depends on what level of skill you want to make it and how pristine of a structure and lifelike. I mean, I do a good job on these buildings. There are a lot of things that I could do to take them up another step and make them really fine scale. A lot of that comes in with the weathering and the detailing, which, you know, eventually once I add them to the layout, I'll be doing some of that too, so they'll even look better at that point in time. But I'm really good with where these buildings are. So, you know, the amount of time that you spend on a building depends on if you're what we would call a rivet counter, where everything has to be exactly as it was in real life. If you take a picture of it, how long does it take you to realize by looking at that picture that, wow, that's a model, that's not a real scene? I mean, I enjoy doing that kind of work. This building is right in the middle of a layout, and you can't get probably within 2 feet of it once it's set in place. So, you know, that you won't be able to get that up close and personal with this building. But I mean, even if you could, it's a nice looking building. So, in any case, spend some time with your trains. Have a good winter, what's left of it, and happy model railroading.